Good evening, everybody. Welcome to our council meeting for the City of Bothell. It's Tuesday, December 2nd. If you join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Excellent. Thank you, everyone. We are missing one council member tonight who is absent and excused. That would be Councilmember Rayu. Everybody should have had a chance to look over the meeting agenda. Hopefully you have a copy in front of you now. Are there any changes, additions, subtractions, or otherwise? Councilmember Sandberg.
I'd like to pull Agenda Bill 14-188 from the consent, please.
Okay, that's consideration of the approval supplemental agreement number 5. Perfect. Deputy Mayor?
Yeah, I was wondering if it would be okay to put the budget study session and the public hearing side by side as opposed to having the transportation mitigation in between the two.
I don't see any reason not to. So would you like to move the tip in front of the budget?
Yeah, that'd be fine.
Is everybody in agreement with that? Any other changes? We do have copies of the projected agenda in front of us tonight. Any changes or additions to that? We do have 2 other meetings in this month of December, the 9th and the 16th, and then we will reconvene in the new year. No changes there? Councilmember Sandberg?
At a previous meeting, we had talked about adding a discussion about fireworks in January.
Mm-hmm.
And we had we postponed that discussion to the end of the meeting to get a council report from the Public Safety Committee that met, but the meeting went late, and so we adjourned the meeting and didn't have that conversation. So
you serve on that committee, I believe, right?
No, I don't.
Oh, you don't? Who?
I serve on that committee, and I'm happy to have that conversation tonight. I guess I would suggest that we
can do that at the end of the meeting?
Yeah, we can do that at the end of the meeting. We could, or after public comment or whenever we want to have that conversation.
Or we can just put it on the projected agenda.
Let's discuss it after the executive session if we have one, or the city manager's report.
Okay.
I'll put it in there. Any other changes on projected? Seeing none, we do have a special presentation this evening. I believe Sabrina Combs is here to address the public in regards to the solid waste contract transition update for the new year. Hi, Sabrina.
Hello, good evening. I have brought Recology Cleanscapes, and I'm actually going to have them give a presentation to you on the update of the transition. So I'm going to ask Kevin Kelly to come forward.
Perfect, thanks.
Sorry, one sec. Just trying to get it to load. There we go.
All right.
Welcome, Kevin.
Thank you. Well, thank you, Sabrina, and Mayor Freed, members of the council. Again, as Sabrina mentioned, my name is Kevin Kelly with Recology Cleanscapes, and with me here tonight to give you an update is Jim Williams, our operations manager, Quinn Schweitzer, Waste Zero manager, who has been managing our implementation. So we just want to run through a few things tonight to give you guys a sense of what we've been up to and where we're at. So just as a little bit of a refresher, the last time we were in front of you, council approved a new 7.5-year solid waste contract. And some of the highlights of that contract that will begin on January 1st are more curbside recycling options for customers, new residential carts that have all been delivered, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. Retail store and customer service center that will be going into the city of Bothell. One of the things that we think is a very nice benefit for commercial customers is that they will have unlimited recycling included with their garbage service. So pretty nice benefit there. And in an effort to reach as many people as possible in the city, we have a website that's translated into 4 languages. That's English, Spanish, Chinese, and Russian, which we identified as the most commonly spoken languages in the city. And finally, we will have a fleet of 10 new CNG-powered trucks going through the city. So now I'm going to turn it over to Quinn, and she can go into a little bit more detail about what we've been up to the past couple of months and what you can expect in the month ahead and going into January.
Thanks, Kevin. Mayor, Council. So when we talk about implementation milestones, really the 2 main things that we know we have to get right in every transition we do. We got to get our operations down right, but we also have to get our communications. If residents aren't aware of this transition, then it'll be problematic. We feel very confident that our communications have been as successful as our operations. So to highlight a couple of those milestones, earlier this fall we were engaged in developing new routes. Our customer service center, which has is specific to Bothell and your new service options, also went live. In November, we began delivering new carts to customers. We also received the new trucks that will be used here in Bothell, and we've been in the process of uploading the software and technology and testing out those systems. And in December, we sent out a communications packet to all residents and businesses. Hopefully, folks have received that either today or tomorrow or within the last couple of days. And that contains complete service information, answers to frequently asked questions, and additional details. Our drivers are in the field right now training on their routes. That will go on throughout the month of December. Prior to the start of new service the last week in December, folks will receive a postcard reminding them of their new collection day. And on January 1st, service begins. And so to go into a little bit more detail about our customer outreach and the communications piece of it, you should have in front of you, thank you, a packet of materials. These are the items that residents have already received or will be receiving in the next couple of days. And we really want to encourage all residents to look closely at this information. The first item that residents received was a postcard announcing the start of new service. That was sent out in October. And it contained some basic service information and the website address where residents could go for additional details. We also posted a series of ads and announcements in the Bothell Reporter, as well as several city newsletters, Bothell Cool, Bothell Bridge, and Hometown Values magazine. Again, the welcome packets should have arrived within the day or two, early December. And again, detailed service information. And prior to the change in service, folks will be receiving a call 1 week before their first Recology Cleanscapes collection, reminding them of their new service day. And then the day before their first collection, they'll receive a second reminder phone call. So we want to make sure folks are very aware of this transition. We've also been utilizing social media to reach out to the community and have participated in a number of community events such as Sustainamania, the UW Bothell Block Party, and Ecotober. And with that, I will hand it over to our operations manager, Jim Williams.
Thank you, Quinn. Mr. Mayor, members of the council. What you see here, well, first of all, Jim Williams, I'm the operations manager for Recology Cleanscapes. I wanted to present to you the days of service changes. On the left, you'll see the current collection days, and on the right, you'll see what we've presented as Recology's residential day changes, highlighted yellow being Monday, the blue Thursday, Tuesdays green, and Wednesday orange, and then down at the bottom there purple is the Friday's day of service. Bottom line, 52% of the city will stay on the same collection day. Drivers, as stated before, drivers are already familiarizing themselves with their new routes. and this combines their experience with the field conditions and our GPS technology to ensure that we get them as much exposure to it as possible. They'll see it all within the next couple of weeks, probably multiple times. This information, these days of service, are available on our website at recologicleanscapes.com/Bothell in a zoomable interactive format so residents can see which day of service they'll be on. Here, we've got an update for you regarding our cart deliveries. New standardized carts for all residential customers have been delivered, just under 27,000. That's all three commodities, which are gray for garbage, blue for recycling, and green for yard waste or organics. These color combinations, color coding, will allow for efficient communications with both the customers, with the residential customers, as well as our drivers for training purposes. Waste Management is currently servicing these carts and will be until the end of the year. And initially there was an issue that I wanted to bring up regarding the settling of these lids, which we've addressed with the manufacturer, and it's large in part of the colder temperatures that we've seen the last couple of weeks. With that, I'm going to hand it over to Kevin. Thank you for your time.
Thanks, Jim. Just to elaborate on that a little bit more, we received some calls from customers who they received their new cart and the lid wasn't fitting quite right. And we, as Jim mentioned, we worked with the manufacturer to sort of figure out what was going on, and it had to do with ways that the carts were stacked and delivered and the cold temperature. But basically, once we got them into the field to see what the problem was, we were able to communicate that basically those would settle out in 24 to 48 hours, which we believe they now have. So here, just to give you a sense of what we're seeing from a customer service standpoint, this is our call volumes and email volumes during the month of November. And so what you see here is about just a little over 1,000 communications during the month. We had that spike there in that second week. That was right when we were in the heart of our cart deliveries. So there was a lot of awareness about the contract, and we saw that spike in calls there, but we have been able to answer calls in an average of 12.2 seconds throughout the entire month, which tells us we have staffed up and are ready for call volumes appropriately. And just to give you a sense of what these calls are coming in about, 63% of those 1,000 were related to the deliveries. And then it dropped way back from there in terms of types of concerns that we were getting. And most of that was related to new schedules, what was happening with the implementation. And then we had about 5% of people who just wanted to update their account, wanted to know what the new services were. And actually, that's a really good thing for us to get that feedback from the customer so that we can ensure that we're providing the most accurate type of service that we can. So another customer service element that we are very excited about is that we will be introducing a customer-focused retail store and customer service center within the city of Bothell. We have submitted a proposal for a site. Until that is completed, we won't announce the location, but as soon as it is completed, rest assured that we will get the word out on that far and wide, and we'll be back to invite you all for the ribbon cutting and grand opening ceremony when it does come along. And if you're not familiar with this concept, it's something that we began in the city of Issaquah. And what it does is it provides an opportunity for customers to come in. They can handle issues that may arise face-to-face. They can pay their bill. One of the unique aspects of it is they can drop off hard-to-dispose of items like styrofoam or electronics. And we have partnerships with some nonprofits that handle it from there. It's a great community gathering space. We've had Cub Scout groups, Girl Scout groups, and environmental stewardship type groups who come in and like to use the space. And then in addition to that, we sell some products that we think are designed to help people think differently about the materials they use and their end of life. They're recycled. They're designed to stay out of the landfill. And so we're really excited to get this concept going in Bothell. And an update on our recycling facility in the industry. You might hear these referred to as MRFs, or materials recovery facilities. Up and running, ready to handle all of the material from Bothell. And we just, we have an open invitation to any council members or staff who would be interested in coming to visit it. It's a great way to kind of see how the process works and to understand why we ask for certain things when we recycle. Because this is, a pretty complex piece of machinery with a lot that goes into it. And it's actually great for school groups and others who are interested. And we, again, we extend that invitation to you and to any community groups who might be interested. So with that, we just want to post up here for folks at home watching and anyone interested. These are the contact numbers to reach us if you have any questions. A couple different ways you can do that. You can call us directly. You can send us a text message. We have a specific email address for the city, specific website for the city where you can find out most information that you might need. And, if you can't find anything with all of that, you're welcome to reach me directly at any time.
Great. Thanks, Kevin. Are you the one specifically in charge of Bothell?
So this is your Bothell team right here. We are your Bothell team.
The three of you. Okay, perfect. Great.
Yes.
Good to know. We have your phone number.
Absolutely.
And now all of Bothell does as well.
I know.
Are you open to questions from council?
Yes, absolutely.
Good. Anybody have questions?
Hey, hey, Kevin, I just had a really practical question. If your pickup day was Thursday, that falls on the 1st, so you would be then, you basically have like 3 extra days of trash. Can you throw out like an extra bag, or what's the story on that?
Sure. So that's a great question. Thank you for bringing that up, because there's a little asterisk next to our January 1st start date. There are 3 holidays that the solid waste industry recognizes. New Year's Day, Thanksgiving, and Christmas. It just so happens that we are starting on one of those holidays. And so anybody who starts on that day is going to get bumped back a day, and that goes into Saturday.
Okay.
So, a Friday customer would be collected Saturday. And if you have a little bit extra out during that time, that's going to be just fine.
Okay, thanks.
Councilmember Evans?
What time do the trucks roll out in the morning, or what time will they be on the streets picking up garbage?
So residentially, we're allowed to be in collection at 7 a.m. So one of the things we always tell customers is, please have your carts to the curb by 7 a.m. in the morning. We know a lot of people sort of get used to maybe seeing the drivers come around at a normal time, but sometimes a backup driver might be going, or for some reason the route may have changed. And so we always want to say, for consistency, please have your cart at the curb by 7 a.m., and that way we'll ensure that it gets collected.
And then they're collecting. How long is the shift? Do they go from 7 to 3? Or is all the garbage picked up in a zone by 3 o'clock or so?
I'll let Jim speak to that. I think he has a pretty good sense of the routes and what time the drivers will be off the streets residentially.
Absolutely. So we want to be out of here by 3:30 every day. That's our goal. With the first month, we expect a couple of delays with the familiarization, and we'll plan for being out here by 3:30 daily. But want to leave it open for any logistical concerns that we might have that rise throughout the day.
And you mentioned, I think you've acquired 10 new trucks, and are those the trucks that will be the 10 trucks that will be working this city?
Yes, sir.
All week long. Okay,
Yeah.
Great. Thank you.
Any other questions? Oh, great. Kevin, thank you so much. Appreciate it. Welcome to the city of Bothell.
Thank you all.
Looking forward to a bright future.
We're excited.
Good. Have a good night. And a clean future. Next item on our agenda this evening is our visitors section. I don't currently have a sign-up sheet, so I'll just look for a show of hands. This is an opportunity for people from public to address the council. We allot 3 minutes for each speaker. Is there anyone here who would like to address council tonight? No. All right. Well, thank you for coming. Consent agenda is next. Is there a motion to pass the consent agenda minus AB 14188?
So moved.
We have a motion by Councilmember Lamb and a second by Councilmember Agnew. If everybody could place their vote. The clerk can display. Passes unanimously with Andy Rayum absent and excused. One item that was pulled was AB 14188 by Councilmember Sandberg.
Thank you. And thank you to Director Lenhart for responding to my questions. I just had a couple of follow-up questions. So, in the second question I asked, which was how is the Main Street extension proceeding when the right-of-way purchase was proposed to be funded by the failed public spaces bond, and you respond that the adjacent developers will complete the design work of the Main Street extension and build it. So, my question is this $40,000 contract, is this the last request that that council is going to be seeing for design work for the extension, and to what percent design level does this bring us?
Steve Morikawa.
Hi, good evening. So what we did in trying to set this Main Street extension up is the assumption always was the developer to the north of it and the developer to the south of it would actually finish design and build it. We wanted to give enough of the conceptual design and urban package so that it looked like the rest of the Main Street along the enhancement, which is on the east side of 527 or Bothell Way. So what this $40,000 does is it allows us access to our consultant. So when the developers come in with their suggestions and their designs, we have a consultant on our side who can sit down and help us work through all the submittals, the design, the intricacies of the design, to make sure that it matches with what we're designing on the other side of the Bothell Way. It does not really complete a design. It helps us basically providing us consultant support. Again, what we're trying to do is we're trying not to enhance the design further on our nickel. We're trying to get the developer to finish the design. We're just trying to get our consultant, give us some money for a consultant to help us work with those developer consultants, essentially.
And so do you anticipate that council will be receiving additional supplemental agreements for design work?
I hope not. I think it would depend on if the first developer's in. If they are successful in getting their permits and starting construction, then I think this will be sufficient. But if for some reason we have a different developer come by and we have to start the cycle all over again, we could be back again. I suspect not, though, because what's happening here is at the same time we got federal funds for Main Street enhancement, which is on the east side. It's all a kind of a timing issue. The developers are a little bit ahead of us, so we need to work with them. Let's say the first set of developers get delayed and we have to wait a couple years and we have to go through this again. By that time, I think we have tied down our design on the rest of the Main Street very tightly, and we can basically hand them and say, make it look like this. So it's kind of this timing issue and the need to have our consultants available to us.
Okay. And then it says, question number 4 was, what is the source of the construction money for the extension project? And as you explained, it's developers we've always intended that developers would pay for the construction. So we would start the design, pay for the initial design costs, and then the developers would finish the design and construct the Main Street extension. And it says, however, if the primary developments to the north and south move forward, let me just read it. Developers are intended to, this is your response. Developers are intended to build the majority of the Main Street extension. There could be a short stretch of frontage that could remain undeveloped if a particular parcel does not redevelop. The city would have to make a decision on whether to complete this or wait until development occurs to complete the frontage. However, if the primary developments to the north and south move forward, the driving surface of this stretch of frontage should be installed. So that means that it becomes passable, it becomes drivable. It's just that not all of the frontage improvements might be completed.
Yeah, there's one parcel, a small parcel. It's kind of a residential parcel on 98th. If you can picture right across from the library, there are 4 houses. The southernmost house is right along the new Main Street frontage. If that parcel doesn't redevelop, then we have to make a choice on putting in that frontage or not. If those 4 parcels, let's say somebody comes in that decides they love the downtown and they're going to buy those 4 parcels and redevelop it, they would be required to build that frontage. We think without that parcel, we can still get the road through. It's just behind the curb, you wouldn't have the sidewalk. So we would have a choice on maybe potentially putting the sidewalk in temporarily, a sidewalk or path, and waiting for redevelopment, or the city could go ahead, and I think it's about 100, 150 feet. It's not a long piece. We could just finish it off if we decided to do that at that point. But we haven't gotten that far yet. We can't predict the future that far yet.
And so the Parks and Public Spaces bond was supposed to purchase right-of-way for this Main Street extension. And so are we still able, when the primary developments to the north and the south move forward, are we still able to complete the driving surface of that stretch? Or how does the...
We have one more parcel to the south that we have to work with in order to finish the roadway through.
So there still has to be right-of-way purchase.
There would have to be right-of-way purchase.
For the driving surface to be completed.
Correct.
Okay. Okay, thank you. That's my questions.
Thanks. Councilmember Evans.
Just to follow up on Councilmember Sandberg's questions, could there, if we have to go ahead and develop the frontage or the roadway, could that be a latecomers agreement for a developer that comes in after we've made the improvements?
That's a good question. I don't know. Eddie, do you know?
Eddie Lowe, nice to see you this evening, sir.
Good evening. The thought there is, like Steve said, it's only about 150 feet. If for us to go into a latecomer, it'd probably be a pretty, elaborate process to get it done. So my guess is that we'll probably either put in, if there is really a need for a path, we will probably do some low-cost paved path rather than a latecomer on it. And then when the development occur in the future, then they'll put in the permanent, sidewalk improvements on the frontage. That would be our recommendation. But Steve has indicated we're not that far along. I'm just looking ahead to see that's the potential that we'll do rather than a latecomer.
Councilmember Sandberg.
I was thinking that, but I just assumed that you would have a latecomer agreement. And so when Councilmember Evans asked that question and you paused, like that might not be a possibility, I guess I don't understand the nature of latecomer agreements. Are they really just site-specific, or don't we have a latecomer agreement that applies to improvements citywide? Because I don't want the taxpayers to be in the position of funding improvements that improve a private parcel that in turn gets to reap the benefit of that right-of-way improvement. So don't we just have latecomer agreements in general?
If we choose to do the frontage improvement, the council, we have the option of entering into a latecomer. My thought is that it's such a small, short stretch of 150 feet that the cost of doing that and trying to go through a latecomer process could be a cost that offsets really doing the work.
Okay.
In general, yes, we will do a latecomer.
Okay. I guess I'll have to ask staff to educate me on the process of latecomer agreements off the dais. Thank you.
Any other questions? Councilmember Evans.
Well, what I heard, the statement was that we would go ahead and do a temporary sidewalk. And if we could get by with that in the interim and then wait until development, if development occurs, then they come in and do the full improvements at that time. So the question is, the temporary improvement going to be adequate? So sounds like to me the latecomer agreements may be a little cumbersome or a little challenging. So if we could make the temporary improvement and have them come back and make the final improvements when they develop the property, that seems like a reasonable approach to it. So.
Good. Is there any motion for this item?
I'd move the recommended action.
Motion by Councilmember Lamb, second by Councilmember Evans. Any discussion? Councilmember Sandberg.
Yeah, I'm going to be supporting the motion. I wanted to relay that a citizen had said to me, "Well, we voted no on the bond, which would have purchased the right of way. So we're assuming that project is not moving forward. Why would you ask for us to vote on something and then move forward with it anyway?" And I guess what I want to say is that I'm voting for this because it is our opportunity to work with the development community to move forward on getting some of these projects completed. So it's not a statement that said, "Oh, well, you voted no and we're going to do it anyway." It's a reflection of reality, and that timing requires us to engage in this contract so that we can move forward with some of the design and construction work that will be provided by the private development community.
Any further comments on the motion?
I'll be speaking in favor of the motion, and I have to confess I don't necessarily see the nexus between the vote that was just articulated, and I think that if that, and I'm not really clearly understanding, I think, what Councilmember Sandberg said, because presumably she's not saying she wouldn't support any improvements that were included in the bond unless somehow we were able to get developer contributions in them. I think there were a lot of important projects that were included in Proposition 1. That's one of the reasons I supported Proposition 1, and there definitely are consequences when those things don't pass. Worthy projects will likely take longer or not be built, and I know that there's many in our community have worked on a lot of these projects who are very concerned about that, in particular the North Creek Forest. So I'm not sure that I fully understand the comments, but I hope that we all will look forward to identifying good projects in our community and bringing them to pass as our fiscal means allow us to.
Everybody can place their vote. And if the clerk can display. Passes unanimously with Councilmember Rayum absent and excused. We are heading into contracts and agreements. AB 14190, consider approval of a contract with Stuart McNichols Harmon Incorporated, PS, for Indigent Defense Services. Peter, nice to see you.
Council members, good evening. It will be a short presentation. The Sixth Amendment of our Constitution guarantees every person accused of a crime the right to an attorney for their defense, regardless of their ability to pay. And then, of course, sorry about that. And in March of 1963, so about 52 years ago, there was a case, a landmark Supreme Court decision, Gideon versus Wainwright, where Mr. Gideon was convicted of a crime that he was later cleared of, and he had no ability to pay for his defense, so he actually defended himself, hence probably the reason that he lost. He appealed that to the Supreme Court with the help of some folks. And in deciding in Mr. Gideon's favor, the Supreme Court mandated that an attorney would be appointed to represent indigent defendant if that defendant is too poor to afford one. So for us, the city pays a public defender for representational services, though we should point out that not all defense lawyers in the court are public defenders. Those services are enumerated in your agenda packet. And our public defender contract with Stuart McNichols and Harmel will expire this December 31st, and it contains within it a provision to extend it for a period of 2 more years. However, as you'll also see in that packet, there has been a recent court decision Wilbur versus Mount Vernon in Burlington that was decided in the U.S. District Court of the Western District of Washington in December of 2013 that will have quite a bit of impact on our management of that program. Bottom line is it'll require more management attention and more focus and more resources. Also, on January 1st of the next year, 2015, there will be new misdemeanor caseload limits that will take effect as part of the state's indigent defense standards. And bottom line there is that under those caseload limits, full-time public defenders must not have caseloads exceeding 300 misdemeanor cases per year in those jurisdictions that have adopted a weighted system, or 400 cases a year in those jurisdictions that use an unweighted system. So because the public defense environment has changed so significantly, the contract has been renegotiated rather than extended. The fee for indigent defense services has risen to $12,500 per month. Additional cases over and above the 100 or the amount per quarter that's included in there will be billed at $300 per case. The proposed contract also moves to an unweighted system because, whereas previously we'd used a weighted system, the new standards have made it so that using that weighted system is no longer to our advantage. The contract also requires additional fees to be collected for special proceedings, appeals, and other expenses that are authorized by the judge. And in preparing this, we've turned to Scott Snyder of Ogden Murphy Wallace for assistance. He assists the Washington City's Insurance Authority and has helped us with it. So I'm available for any questions you might have.
Perfect. Anyone have questions? Councilmember Evans?
In your staff report, you mentioned that the ACLU is identifying communities that are not in compliance and sending out letters. Did we receive a letter to that effect?
No, we did not. Okay. And I'm assured that we're at the forefront, so there's very little risk that will be identified.
So what we're doing should meet the ACLU's
yes.
concerns?
Yes. Scott Snyder was actually counsel to Mount Vernon and Burlington in trying to help them comply with the court's decision. So he has firsthand knowledge of how to do that.
And what qualifies a person for these services? How do they determine?
Well, apparently, as I understand it, and fortuitously, TJ's in the room here, but as I understand it, they have to, different jurisdictions do it in different ways, but bottom line is that person has to make a case that they cannot afford the services of a lawyer, and then it's up to the judge to certify that, to agree to that. The judge may ask for a proof of that in the form of tax returns or pay stubs or whatever else you might have. But the bottom line is it's the judge that makes that determination. Would that be correct, TJ? Okay.
And then just one last question. I know we met with our legislators last week, or the last week in November anyway, and I was curious. I wasn't able to attend that meeting. And with our legal costs going up significantly, was there any discussion? Did the legislators give us any idea that there's a pot out there somewhere that we can tap for support offsetting some of these costs? I don't know if you heard anything from the legislators.
Well, we talked about our legal costs going up, but in a different context, not in the context of indigent case.
There was a very brief reference to it because of the fact that the effect that this has on us is it increases the cost of public defense. What the WCIA will tell you is that that's a four-legged stool that you also have to at the same time consider in this system that had been in equilibrium, that the other legs are the police department, the prosecutor, and the court. So you've beefed up the public defense system, but you've left the other three unattended. Not unattended, but you haven't given them the same attention.
That's it? Anyone else? Councilmember Sandberg?
How many indigent cases do we get a quarter?
We get about 154 from the last year's average per quarter.
So our our contract is based on 100 indigent cases.
It's a base fee that was developed over the last, actually the approach had been to use 100, assumption of 100 a quarter, and base the base fee on that. And then the supplementary fee for cases over that is, as you can notice, it's less than the per case fee of the first 150. And that wording that you noticed in there, that should probably be changed, and the council's looking, Scott Snyder's looking at making it so that it doesn't refer to a history of 100 cases, because by now it's 154 cases per quarter, and it continues to rise.
Okay. Thank you.
Anyone else? Is there a motion?
I'll move the recommended action.
We have a motion by Councilmember Lamb and second by Councilmember Agnew. Any discussion on the motion?
I wanted to speak to the motion. Peter, thank you so much for your work on this. I can tell you that the City of Bothell is getting an unbelievable value when I look at the charge of $300 for handling a misdemeanor case. It's extraordinarily difficult, and I'm impressed that we're working with a firm of this caliber, and I'm very impressed with the economic return that you've been able to provide for the city, as well as protecting the constitutional rights of everybody in our community. So thanks for your work on this.
Agree. Anyone else? Seeing none, if everybody could place their vote. And the clerk display passes unanimously with Councilmember Ray absent and excused. Thank you so much, Peter. Next item on our agenda is the study session regarding transportation impact fees. We did change the schedule a little bit this evening. So this is AB 14192, and Don Feen is here with a presentation this evening. Thank you, Don.
Good evening, Mayor and Councilman. Presentation regarding the transportation impact fee update. To recap from last presentation in November, this program was previously updated in 2008 and 2011. It's a requirement of the Growth Management Act. And the project construction costs have changed due to inflation and changes in scope, and new projects have been added. We developed a rate study, determined a fee project list, determined growth estimates, and determined trip generation rates for different land uses. And once again, here's our summary of the changes. The proposed program has $162 million worth of projects identified with 12 projects. That's an increase over $134 million from the 2011 program, and hence the need for the increase in the impact fee. And that impact fee for a single family, you can see, is generally a 18.5% increase over the current fee. And we showed the comparisons of the transportation impact fees for the good comparison cities around us. And you can see Bothell would be in the upper middle. So the questions that came up and concerns regarding at our previous presentation were why there was such a large increase for impact fees over the last few years. And in summary, that we have a lot of large transportation projects primarily associated with the downtown redevelopment. And those impact fees are the largest source of our local funds since the Auto Tab initiative was passed. We were also asked to provide impact fee comparisons for comparable cities that include the fire, parks, schools, and transportation impact fees. And those comparisons were provided to the council, and that puts Bothell in the lower third overall of all the comparable cities. We were also asked to reach out to the development community regarding the increase. We mailed out 41 letters to active developers. Prior to this meeting, we received one response from the master builders of Snohomish County. Going over the large increase that we had prior to this, you can see the difference between the 2002 adopted program and 2008. And that's primarily, once again, due to the large projects associated with the downtown, the Wayne Curve and Crossroads in particular. And here's a graph showing the increase of the traffic impact fees over the years. And you can see that there was a phased increase during the 2008 update. And you can see the Crossroads and Wayne Curve projects are largely responsible for that. And in our next few years, we're looking at the Wayne Curve Phase 3 and the Multi-Way Boulevard projects that need to be funded. When you look at the overall pie for the transportation, you can see Bothell's been very good in getting grants, and that's a large part of the pie. And you can see the traffic impact fees only make up 8% overall. However, if you look at what our local impact fees are, it's over half of the pie that we really count on the traffic impact fees since the vehicle tab initiative became law. And those transportation impact fees are the largest source of local impact, local revenue, I should say. And those are used for required matching dollars for grants, of course. And this is our overall impact fee and where we are amongst the good comparison cities around us. And you can see Bothell would be in the lower third of those cities as far as overall impact fee. And with that, I'd be glad to entertain any questions, and we'll bring back the impact fee for approval back in January, unless you choose to do so tonight.
Great, thanks, Don. Anybody? First questions? Is that a hand, Deputy Mayor? No. Okay. Councilmember Sandberg.
Thank you for the presentation. Can you go back to the slide that had the pie chart for the capital fund contributions? There we go. One before that. So the total contributions. Oh, yeah, capital project revenues, all sources. So from that pie graph, it looks like the traffic impact fees only provide 8% of the total capital project revenues. And yet the consultant has used in their analysis to determine the traffic impact fees the assumption that that development will cover 25% of the cost of the new roads. And so, can you explain to me the difference between targeting 25% cost recovery but ending up at 8% cost recovery?
You just simply don't get enough you don't get the full amount of development to recover the entire 25%. Essentially, is the problem. So you're not going to get that total amount. But there's 25% of the 25% is the allowable portion that's attributed to growth that can be charged towards the impact fees. So that portion of the projects can count towards the impact fees.
And so you say that's the allowable growth. So is that how other cities say that use that 25% allowable growth?
It depends on the city and what's going on as far as growth.
And so how is that determined, I guess?
They look at growth projections from the planning department and that kind of thing, and various other tools as far as what the growth is going to be in the city.
Okay. And then
the needs of the infrastructure needs, of course.
So there's in calculating the cost per trip, again to get at that final traffic impact fee, it seems that if you overestimate the number of new trips, then you can artificially decrease the average cost per trip. So is there how accurate is that forecasted number of new trips, or is there an incentive to increase that?
Well, it's an educated estimate.
Okay.
Based on this, the needs and the historical projections and that kind of thing.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
Great. Thank you. Other questions? Councilmember Evans.
Thank you. My experience with impact fees has been related to residential and development, single family or multifamily, that type of thing, so much per unit. And it's been my understanding that those fees could only be used to offset the impact of that new development. So for development of new facilities to support those new development around homes, whatever the case may be. So I guess when we're using these funds to offset Wayne Curve, Crossroads, Multi-Way Boulevard, whatever the case may be, how do we... So some of that traffic was there long before this development occurred, and so I guess I have not had the experience of working with transportation impact fees to understand how that impact is measured, or I guess how do we know that transportation fee is going to offset the impact of new development and versus old development or existing development?
Right. They do a cost allocation based on the different projects and how they're related to growth. So the 25% is an overall weighted average. They have information back in the appendixes. I think I believe it's Exhibit A. If you look at Exhibit A, you can see some of the projects have more of a growth-related impact than others. So but they're all looked at individually, and then together it's all weighted together to find out what the impact fee is going to be for each trip.
So but I guess just trying to get my arms around this. So as a new development comes into the city, they're going to bring in new traffic for that development. But with our highways that we have, Bothell Way and 522 and those types of things, there's new development all around us occurring. So some of that development outside of our community is creating an impact on those roadways.
Right. That's factored out. The outside city growth is not part of this component. It's only this. It's the city related growth, and I think that's referred to near the beginning as far as city growth. If you look at the flow chart on page 9, it goes over that. It's the remaining. It breaks up for the whole. It breaks up. There's $41 million due to city growth, investments to city growth. That's 25%, and there's 75% that's existing and outside city growth.
Okay.
And for that portion, other funds are needed.
Okay, and then looking at the comparisons that you provided us, there's a large spread. So Sammamish must have a tremendous amount of development going on in their community, or is that why their rates are so high?
I would assume they must have some large transportation infrastructure projects and a lot of growth going on.
and Bellevue doesn't have very much growth because they're at $2,600 per trip. So it seemed like there was a real spread on these developments, and it would be interesting to know how each city came to those, and I'm assuming using the similar process than what we did. But the spread is all over the table there. I just, as a calculation, I took out the high and the low in transportation and came up with an average of $4,900 for the other cities that are there, which would put us considerably above the average at that point, which I guess follows with some of the information you provided. And interesting, if you take out the high and the low in parks, you have an average of about $2,800, and we're at $1,345. So either we need to giddy up on the park impact fees, or whatever the case, because we're behind on the average if that's the case. And so it was interesting, and I'd be interested to hear what the rest of the council has to say on what our increases, what their feelings are on that. So thank you.
Great. Councilmember Lamb.
Don, thanks for your presentation. And I don't necessarily have a ton of questions for you. I mean, I guess I have some sort of, I guess I do have one. The last time we updated this was 2011. Is there a reason that we don't update it on an annual basis like our other fees? Is it just because it's hard work, or
a lot? It's quite involved, and you really want to update it when there's a big, significant difference. I think that it's worth the time and effort and expense of doing.
And is that driven by statute that we have to do into this formula, or could you? I mean, if we were to say when we adjusted this, that we would do it by some smaller amount, but then going forward, could we index it for inflation? Because clearly that's a part of what's going on, right?
Right. It always could have been indexed by inflation, and we had that phased increase over a few years, and then I don't think the inflation for maybe a couple years was applied.
We didn't really have
it. Wasn't applied, okay. And I would definitely recommend the ordinance allows it, and the new ordinance allows it as well. So
it's kind of. I mean, I guess my feeling is right now the jump is pretty dramatic. And I mean, if you look at it, not just for, I mean, the master builders obviously were focused on single family homes, but it's pretty dramatic throughout, for restaurants and for a lot of people. And I know I talked to a small business person over in Woodinville who was talking about what their traffic mitigation fees were simply for moving from one part of town to another part of town. And they're like, it's crazy. Like, we're the exact same business. We're not new in Woodinville. We're not creating any new traffic impact, but because we are moving from one side of the city to the other side of the city, we're now having to pay, at that time, I forget what it was, but it was a very substantial sum of money. And that is kind of inequitable in a way. I mean, if you're really trying to tag new uses, somebody who moves from one part of the city to the other, it's not a new use, right?
I'm not sure that specific case, but I mean, they are allowed to do a study to show what their actual impacts are and how many trips they are generating. So they could, in certain cases, like, I don't know the specific case you're talking about, but they could do a study and show that the net impact may be less than what the new impact is by itself. So I don't know. So that is allowed, and that is allowed by our ordinance.
Okay. So I mean, I guess my feeling would be I'd be more comfortable with a smaller increase this year and then indexing it to inflation going forward, so we don't have to do large leaps. But I just feel like right now we have a huge amount of activity. It's hard to start a restaurant. It's hard to start a small business. And I feel like this is not, the increases that we're putting on are really, really substantial. And especially, it only hits you when you're first doing it, when you're first building a home or when you're first starting a business. You're paying that fee, and that adds, it adds to the burden of somebody starting a business. And if we don't have people starting businesses in Bothell, we don't have people to pay, for our services and to pay our taxes. And so I'm concerned that message is, I think we want to make this a good and as easy as possible place to start a business, but also fairly, collect revenue to pay for the services. I'd be more interested in looking at what our existing services are and so that everybody is paying contributing to their city services in an equitable manner. But I feel like the current proposal falls too hard on new businesses and is too large of an increase. I would favor a more modest increase, and then so we don't get out of whack indexing it to inflation as we move forward. So that's just where I'm at.
That's good. Others? No? Councilmember Sandberg?
Well, I am in favor of the staff recommendation. It's often said that, people don't like growth. Well, I think that people don't like growth when they see that it doesn't pay for itself. And that is what this traffic impact fee study is trying to get at, an equitable allocation of having new development pay for growth. And so of the $162 million identified in our capital facility plan for transportation projects, the investments that are due to city growth is $41 million. So that's the growth allocation, and I feel confident in the consultant's analysis of that. We have a very aggressive transportation improvement program and capital facilities program, and it's that aggressive program that drives these traffic impact fees. And if we're not collecting traffic impact fees, if we're decreasing traffic impact fees for new development, then all we're doing is we're increasing those costs for existing taxpayers. And so I don't want, I think we have a solid study here that provides the rationale for the proposed traffic impact fees, and any decrease in that shifts that responsibility, that cost, onto existing taxpayers. And as we've seen in the pie chart, we're collecting 8% of our total capital project revenues when we're trying to target for the traffic impact due to city growth, whereas what we're trying to target is 25%. I think that we are on par with our traffic impact fees for other King County jurisdictions. I know the master builders in their letter to us said that we will have the highest, if adopted, Bothell will have the highest traffic impact fee imposed in Snohomish County, which isn't true. It'll be lower than Linwood, but I think that we have other comps that we've looked at in King County that shows that we are lower, as our utility manager said, as the upper mid. And then when you consider all of our impact fees together, we're in the lower third amongst our peers for total impact fees. And so I don't think that we're asking new development to overpay its fair share. And finally, we rely on this revenue stream to provide matching dollars for federal grants, federal and state grants. So if we do not want to reduce our ability to provide matching dollars, because it's that grant money. I think 60% of our transportation projects have been funded through grant money. Again, that is not just free money from the sky. That is tax dollars. But we have been very successful in being awarded those grants because we've had dollars to match it here at the local level. So I'm in support of the staff recommendation. I feel it's too low, but I will definitely accept what our consultant has told us. And then I'd also just like to say that in terms of updating the plan, what this traffic impact fee does not include is the 35th 35th Avenue corridor improvements, which is a significant cost. And once we get that project described in greater detail, I hope that we can add it to this traffic impact fee list and update the traffic impact fees accordingly.
So I'll make comment. Don, thank you for putting these numbers together, and as requested, you did do that comparison with a lot of the King County cities. I did also receive, as all council members did, the Master Builders Association list as well, which shows that we will be the highest in Snohomish County. So that's with Everett, that's with the current Linwood fee, which has the new fee has not been passed. If we pass this, we will be the highest. Mill Creek's at 3,000, Moreau's at 2,200, Edmonds is 1,100, Mukilteel's at 1,800, Mountain Lake Terrace is at 854. Ours would be at 6,494. So that puts us right up there. Sometimes it's good to achieve. I don't know, this is one that I want to be at the top of the list. As I look through this list and do a comparison, there are some significant percentage increases. As I look at our downtown, as we've been planning downtown and trying to draw investors here, both from retail aspects, from movie theater investors, from grocers, from hotel, motel folks, I look at the percentages that they'd be looking at as they're considering which city to invest in. I look at the hotel, motel line. The suggested increase is a 42% increase per room from last year. When I look at the Quick Lube vehicle stop, that's a 20% increase. Look at the movie theater, increase per seat is a 19% increase in mitigation fee. When I look at restaurants, which we're having new restaurants open in the city of Bothell under the current fee, but we hopefully have others that are considering it as well, that's a 20% increase on the mitigation fee. Looking at retail shopping centers, which huge part of our plan is the retail shopping center areas, is an 18% increase. And the list can go on and on. Another 20% for pharmacy drugstore, which I know we've been talking about. 26% increase for administration and office. I don't think anybody up here disagrees that an increase to cover costs is out of line. I just think the percent increase in some of these is too far. I think what happened is we lagged too far behind and we're trying to catch up too fast. And so what I'd love to see is something that we take maybe a 5-year approach like we did in the past. I can't remember which fee that we did that on, but we divided what was going to be a large jump in 1 year and divided it over 3 years and split that increase up to catch us up over time. It just seems a better way to approach it. So I guess my suggestion would be is to look at these perceived increases and consider a 5-year plan to get us caught up to where we should be. But as of today, these seem too significant for me to support this evening. So, anyone else? Councilmember Agnew.
I agree with Councilmember Sandberg. I think the increase is reasonable. I think staff's done their due diligence, and I'll be in support of it when it comes back to the council.
Deputy Mayor, any comments or questions?
First off, a couple questions, at least one. In page 15 of the study that's in the packet, there's the comparison with other impact fee programs, and I think the first one listed there is Redmond, and that figure is outside the downtown Overlake area. What is it inside the downtown Overlake area, and what's the average for the city?
I believe it's lower for the downtown, but I don't know if I have that. I'll ask their consultant if he has that information.
Good evening. I don't have the exact number. It is a bit lower in downtown. We could compute an average if you'd like to see that.
Okay. Well, I noticed that in Linwood you gave two figures where the city center is lower than the rest, but I was just curious why it wasn't included up there also. And then do we put a mitigation fee on an existing business that expands?
If So they would probably have to pay in that case, and then there would be, they would net out how many extra trips are generated.
Okay. All right. Still studying and researching. I'll reserve my comments and for later.
So that was the first round of questions. Does anybody want to go through a second round? So I'll entertain a motion then. Oh, actually, no, I won't. This is just a study session. It comes back in January, doesn't it? Okay, so I guess we need to get more direction from council for this to come back for a formal vote. It sounded like 2 people would be in support. I heard 2 people wouldn't be supportive of this high of an increase, so I think we need to give Don a little bit more direction.
So you're looking at me because I haven't commented.
And Bill.
I'm going to open it up for everybody to do so.
I'll start off the other thing. So one comment that was made earlier about the comparison of other jurisdictions, one of the reasons we compare favorably is not because necessarily of the city of Bothell, but the North Shore School District, for reasons that are sort of unbeknownst to me, has not been collecting a mitigation fee, and so they don't have any impact fee at all, whereas in other jurisdictions the school district has. I mean, given the fact that they've asked the taxpayers to pay for new growth in there, that's odd to me, but they don't. They haven't asked for that mitigation fee, so I think we're skewed in that. That may change in the future as we go forward. What I would really encourage my colleagues to consider is this is a challenging time to start a business. It's not an easy thing to do. And, you know, we always, as Councilmember Evans pointed out quite rightly earlier, when they say, well, I want growth to pay for itself, you know, a lot of homes were constructed when we didn't have these, when we didn't have these mitigation fees in place. And so a lot of people use the same roads and take advantage of the same improvements without necessarily being able to participate in them. I'm not opposed to increasing the fee, and the debate, to be clear, it was stated earlier that if we decrease these fees, nobody's talking about decreasing these fees. The question is the rate at which these fees will increase. I'm supportive of a substantial increase in the fees and indexing the fees to inflation going forward, but I think you can't just look at business as being a piggy bank that you kind of always go back to, and particularly when it comes to new businesses. One of the cornerstones of our community is we want to be a good place to start a family, and we want to be a good place to start a business. This hits the people hardest who are buying a new home and the people who are trying to start a new business. And I was looking through these fees. We have one actually specifically for video rentals, which are being increased, which is really tough because I don't think that business is going so well of late. And if they're opening a new one, that's simply, and maybe the final nail in the coffin, the increase in that fee. But I think the others are ones where those users are also generating other tax revenue to the city that residents don't generate. Residents don't generate the same level of economic activity and the same level of taxation. Those business owners are paying property tax, they're paying utility tax, they're remitting sales tax to the city, and so I think and all of that general fund money also goes into help with our transportation projects and with the M&O that we have to work on. So I think that may be an element in here that, particularly with the businesses, it's a little easier argument with the single family residential, but I think with the businesses, it really hasn't been broken out by that. And I can see the intensity of use when you're talking about people who are coming in. But for example, a movie theater, it says a movie theater would be charged $254 per seat in a movie theater, up from $213 per seat currently. I'm not sure all of those trips would be new trips outside of the city of Bothell. It may be that the people who would be coming to that movie theater would be people who would already live in the city of Bothell, who would be using our roads anyways. And although I don't necessarily look at that and say the methodology is skewed, I'm just saying as a practical matter, it's fine in the ivory tower to sit up here and say, you know what, we need this money, so we're just going to turn to business and say pay up. But the reality is those are real people who employ real people and who have real burdens on their shoulders that have to pay that. they're taxpayers, and they're our neighbors, and they're the businesses that we patronize here, and they're the new neighbors and new businesses that we want to attract to the city of Bothell. Again, we're all on board for an increase. I think we just need to, I think we need to stagger it and index it so that it's not such a huge swallow all at once. And candidly, I wish we had done that in 2011, and maybe we wouldn't be talking about such a huge increase here tonight.
Councilmember Evans.
Do we have projections for, this would be for 2015 moving forward, do we have projections a year or two out what these costs might be or could increase to or recommend be increased?
We would recommend that it would go at inflation after that, at the CPI rate after that. So
okay. And I appreciate the comments of the council. I worry. I don't want to run business off either, and I want them to come here, and they are seeming to come here. So I guess they're paying our current fee, and they're coming to wherever development and the demand is, and we're a growing area, and so I don't know how much the fee deters them from coming here. If the demand is here, then they're going to come here and they'll pay for it, figure out a way to pay for it. But I am concerned that the increase is kind of a big hit all of a sudden. I like the idea of going on an annual basis, increasing these. The other side of it is the transportation costs. We heard people when we were talking about the 35th improvements saying, well, you collect these impact fees, but the roads, the improvements aren't ahead of the impacts. The impacts come, and then maybe we get some of the improvements on down the line or something. So, I see both sides of this equation. I just and I see our traffic demands and that type of thing. I would be interested in these comparisons. It shows for Linwood that if adopted for 2015, that one will go up significantly, almost $2,000 more, $1,600 more, which is more than what our increase would be.
That's in their code, that it's going to, effective January 1st, 2015. It's not a completely accurate statement that the
that is
master
proposed.
Builders made. It's in their code. They would have to go to council to take it out.
Okay.
It's in their code.
And development continues to occur there in that city. And we want development here. We don't want to run them off with too high of fees. Yet we have all these transportation needs and that type of thing. So I'm a little conflicted as to what's the right approach here. I think I would be interested in, Councilmember Freed mentioned a 5-year potential phasing. I would be interested in a phasing program, and as Councilmember Lamb said, we are, I think, in support of an increase in the fee. Maybe as an alternative, consider going to 6,000. Just throw this out as a number: 6,000 in 2015. And on up to 6,400 or so, 6,494 in 2016. Now that's 2 years, and that's still a pretty heavy jump. But by 2016, I don't know what the demand may even be greater at that point in time. So,
Councilor Evans, would you yield for a moment?
Sure.
I'm looking at it kind of holistically on all of this, and I mean, what I would propose, and I think it's a large jump, as it were, but I would propose an increase of 10% across the board and then indexing it to inflation after that. And I think then that captures, you're not singling out one particular industry, because some of these are up 20%. They're really substantial. A 10% increase is, several multiples of inflation right now. I think that's a very large increase, and then we would catch ourselves up with what inflation costs would be after that. I think that's a a reasonable proposal. It's a substantial increase to the fees as they exist right now, which are already, I think, on the higher end of other jurisdictions. And that would be my proposal, rather than picking out each individual one, but just saying from the staff, from the existing impact fee rate that we had, to increase that by 10% and then to index it to inflation going forward.
That's fair on some of them, but some actually went down. For like hospitals, it's at $690. It used to be at $7, and churches.
So, Councilmember Lamb, example, the existing transportation fee, $54.81, you'd recommend that go up 10% this year.
Yes.
2015.
2015, and then
inflation
thereafter be indexed by inflation.
But then I would recommend this is something that we're going to have to look at on an annual basis, or semi-annual basis at least. Or every 2 years. Because if the costs are going up on our projects, somehow we need to stay.
The inflation isn't exclusive. You can certainly examine it every year. The inflation just means that you don't have a period of time where you don't adjust it at all. It simply allows you to have a built-in mechanism by which it increases every single year.
And so you're saying a 10% increase across all of the different ones that are listed here in the report.
I am.
And with a look at that at inflation.
And although I understand that there are certain people who would be sort of losers and winners under that, I think everybody needs to share, and I think it's a fair way to do it across the board.
I think it might be good for the consultant to discuss the fact that some of the fees went up more than others, and the reason is because of the calculation that's adjusted globally for different types of uses and their impact. So some of them, as was mentioned, have actually gone down a little. I think like some of the school per students went down, for instance, and that kind of thing. So Don Samdol.
Perhaps I'd make a suggestion. On the rate table, if you increase the cost per trip by 10%, and then we allowed the rates to be calculated based on that. The reason the rates change is the national data on trip generation is updated regularly, and that's why certain uses like banks and so forth, the rates went down based on the most updated information. So you'd still, some would go a little less than 10%, some might be a little bit more than 10%.
So you're saying right now, what was the increase in the per trip generation from this proposal to our last one that you're proposing would be increased by 10%?
I don't have the exact percent. It's probably about 20%.
Okay.
And I'm just saying if we...
No, I think that's, I appreciate that comment, and I think that's a reasoned approach that fits within the study that you've done. So I would support, again, we're not making motions as a study session. I would support what the consultant has just recommended, which is a 10% increase in the cost per trip, and then adjusting that for CPI going forward.
Councilmember Evans, you still have the floor.
Thanks for yielding.
I had some other thoughts, but I think they were answered in that discussion there. So,
Does that proposal sound of interest to you? Would you like to see that come back?
I would like to see that come back. Again, I am concerned about the cost of our projects that we have in there, and recovering this cost. We're covering 8% according to the table there. And I don't want to necessarily pass this cost on to the residents, and I don't really think that's what would happen. We may have to look for additional grants. We could stipulate that we don't want to pass that on to the public, and so there would be whatever we would have to make up, we would have to continue to look for grants or other sources of funding to make up those additional costs of the projects. Is what I would say.
Thank you, Mr. Evans. Councilmember Sandberg.
I'm not going to support that, the suggested proposal. We had a consultant do a thorough analysis, and now what I'm hearing is 10% is what feels right. 10% is what, I think the business community can go with, or what the development community can go with. I think that's what's fair. And I don't think that's robust analysis. I think that's just kind of let's go with a number that feels more comfortable. Yes, it's a challenging time to start a business. However, we are seeing an incredible amount of activity in our city, incredible amount of interest in our city, and other jurisdictions who have higher traffic impact fees are seeing an incredible amount of interest. Kenmore, Sammamish's traffic impact fee is over $11,000, whereas ours proposed is $6,500. So, like Councilmember Evans said, is it true that when you increase your impact fee, you're going to turn away business and development? I don't think that's the case. And right now and in the foreseeable future, because the North Shore School District is not going to be collecting a traffic impact fee in the foreseeable future, our total impact fee is low in comparison to neighboring jurisdictions. So it is a bargain to come and develop in Bothell, regardless of whether the traffic impact fee goes up. And we can say as much as we want that, well, if we decrease the transportation impact fee for new development, we don't want that to go on to the backs of the taxpayers, but it will. It will directly, and it will in our inability, again, to provide matching funds for grant dollars, for federal and state grant dollars. So I think that we had a very robust analysis performed for us. Yeah, we do see increases in the transportation impact fee, but that's because we have an aggressive development program. I can remember having in the study session on the capital facilities plan saying, why do we really want to add that 522 stage 3? I think that's a $52 million project. That portion of the road in the westernmost part of the city is functional. It's not beautiful, but it's functional, and it is safe in the far west portion. And the decision was made to keep it in the capital facilities plan. So when we make those decisions to add these projects, like the 522 and the Multi-Way Boulevard, when we make those decisions for those expensive projects, then we have to expect these downstream impacts. And one of the downstream impacts is increasing our transportation impact fee. And it's such a small portion of the pie. And we have our analysis to show the justification for the increase. So I don't support dropping below what the consultant and the staff recommends for us, and I don't find there's rigorous rationale for doing 10% now and then indexing for inflation. And if that's a decision that the council wants to go through, I would like to know what kind of deficit that's going to result in collection of fees, what that dollar number is, so that I can tell people, well, we didn't increase the transportation impact fees to the level suggested by staff and a consultant. That resulted in a deficit of X dollars, and that money has to come from somewhere.
Councilmember Agnew, any comments? Nope. Deputy Mayor Spivey?
So what was the reasoning for the school impact fee going down?
We actually have no impact.
The comment was nationally the impact fee for schools went down. The consultant made that comment.
Oh, that's the traffic impact fee per student. I am not sure if I know the background. Maybe Don knows.
It's based on the most current information about trip generation at schools of that type. So I can't.
But that's based off of a national trend.
Right.
Okay. So for me, one of the things that there's a little bit of a flaw is locally the school districts have rolled back their transportation to the level that they used to provide. So what we're seeing is a higher number of single or families driving their kids to school. So there's your national studies aren't necessarily reflecting what's happening locally and regionally, and I look at churches. I drive there. There's areas I will not drive in Bothell because of the amount of traffic that is being generated by churches, and we have police officers out there to monitor what's going on. So I'm a little troubled that schools and churches you're showing a reduction when around here they're increasing. So I'm a little concerned with the things like that in the study. I would be interested in seeing how the different alternatives proposed tonight, how they play out, what those numbers look like. I think that's the best way for me anyway, to decide on which way I want to go. I need to see how the spread this out over a 3 or 5 year window, or raise it up 10% and then index it to inflation. I'd like to see how what these numbers look like and how it affects some of our projects and stuff. But again, I'm a little troubled with the fact that the national trend on some things is totally opposite of our local and regional trends, and so I think that what we have to remember is this is an impact study, and it does. Obviously, doesn't reflect what goes 100% of what goes on around here and how and in our traffic patterns and different things. So,
our Deputy Mayor Spivey, do you mind if we just do a quick interruption?
Sure.
Public Works Director Erin had something that she'd like to contribute.
Sorry to interrupt. I just wanted to point out the reminder that transportation impact fees, the trips are PM peak trips. So the trips that go on during the day or during the morning, as you were mentioning for schools and churches, aren't part of the analysis for this particular impact fee.
Okay. But anyway, I would still like to see how the different ideas floated out here, what that looks like.
Okay, so there was mention coming up with the number 10%, Councilmember Sandberg. I actually would like to see 5%. And I heard Deputy Mayor Spivey say 3 to 5%. So far, 2 people said they'd like to see something come back at a 10% analysis.
Mayor,
yeah.
Correct you. It was a 3 to 5 year window of step increases, not a 3 to 5% increase.
Okay, perfect. So I've heard 2 people say that they are in favor of what the staff has proposed. I've heard 4 people say they'd like to see something different come back to lessen the burden, immediate impact. One proposal that was on the table, not for vote but for consideration, was to do a 10% increase in the first year and to consider tying to inflation going forward. I would like to support Deputy Mayor Spivey's suggestion of looking to do these increases over a 3 to 5 year period. So since we don't have a majority decision, it sounds like there's 3 different routes. One is leave the proposal as is. The second is look at a 10% increase this year with a tying to inflation going forward. And then the mayor and deputy mayor's suggestion of looking to phase these suggested increases in over a 3 to 5 year period. So I don't know if that gives you enough direction to come back to council with those 2 new routes, or if you'd like us to go through another round and narrow it down even more.
I can bring that back, and then I'll provide my recommendation, and then we'll go from there. Is that
perfect? Councilmember Evans.
I'm interested that the only person that we heard from was the master builders, and we sent out 41 letters. So I don't know if we need to send out a reminder, but I would be very interested in, are those people going to come back and say, no, we obviously do not want to pay higher fees, or are they going to say, no, we're in the ballpark? I mean, I would be interested in, if we do get any feedback from those people, what that might be.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Don.
Thank you.
Yep. So that ends that item. on to the next item on our agenda, which is AB 14191, which is a continued public hearing regarding city manager's proposed 2015-2016 biennial budget. The public hearing is open, and our city manager, Bob Stowe, is with us for the presentation.
Thank you, Mayor, and good evening, Council. So I presented the budget to the City Council on November 4th. We've also had a couple study sessions, one on November 18th, and of course this evening, and we'll talk about it again. But this was a budget that I presented to Council, represents $219,399,285. Right now the schedule is for Council to approve the budget on December 9th. We also have a meeting on December 16th. If you so choose to utilize that meeting for budget discussions. But tonight's opportunity for our public hearing is for you to receive any public testimony or comment regarding my proposed budget that I submitted to Council for consideration on November 4th. And so with that, Mayor, I'll step aside and ask you to open the public hearing and request any public comment.
And we are open, and I do not have anybody on the sign-up sheet as of yet. But if there's anybody from the public who'd like to make comment, you can raise your hand. All right, seeing none. Is there a motion to close the public hearing?
Second.
So we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Councilmember Sandberg?
So are we going to reopen it again next week when we discuss it again?
No.
So if a member from the public wanted to address the council next week, they would not be allowed to because the public hearing was closed tonight?
They would have the opportunity during the visitor section to make comment.
All right.
Anybody else? All in favor of closing the public hearing, you place your vote. And if clerk can display, passes 5-1 with Councilmember Rayum absent and excused. Anybody from council like to discuss this item? Councilmember Evans.
Thank you, Mayor. I apologize for not getting these questions drafted into the staff, but I think most of them are pretty straightforward. We're proposing adding, I see different calculations based on what page I'm looking at, but anywhere from 5 to 7 new positions. And then there's some positions that we are reinstating. I think there's a couple there. And then there's positions that are that were term positions that are now being rolled into permanent positions, I think. So even though that's been budgeted, that still we're making a commitment to now that position's a permanent position in the city. So we're having an increase in staff, and so my question is, based on the status of our projects and the unfortunate lack of passage of our bond issue, are those projects, do we still need to bring some of these people on board now? Or if our projects are slowing down based on available funding and things, can we stagger bringing those people in throughout the process? And as I went back and looked at my budget, it looked like that's kind of what was the plan anyway, to increase it. But I'm just wondering now, with funding being a little tighter, we're having to look closer for some of our funding on our projects. Do we need to bring as many staff on as was originally intended?
Sure, good question. I think I'd ask our Public Works Director to respond to that.
Okay.
The positions, the Public Works positions that are recommended in the budget are related to budgeted and funded projects and or projects in the case of the street positions, they're for projects that are already constructed and that we will be responsible to maintain starting next year. So, and the engineering positions that are in there are project term positions. So as soon as the project funding is no longer there and we don't need as many people, those positions will no longer exist.
Okay, but I noticed, like in finance, for example, I think we've got a couple term positions that we're now converting to permanent positions. So positions can sometimes be like portables at the schools. They go in as portables, but they stay there forever and ever, which is fine. If the demand or the need is there, that's fine. But I just, was wondering about that, and so they are tied to the projects that you're doing now. So the fact that another question I had was on the funding proposals for the projects that were proposed in our bond. One we talked about tonight, the Main Street enhancements. Do we have a proposal for how, or will that be something we'll be discussing in our retreat as to how we fund those projects that were not approved in the levy?
I suspect that will be a top retreat topic as to how we fund those projects that were in Proposition 1, as well as how do we fund our street and maintain our streets going forward.
Okay. The PIO position that's being proposed, 50% of that I think is coming from tourism and 50% from the general fund, I guess. Do our other departments, I thought I've seen PIO officers maybe in our police and fire departments. Do departments have PIOs, or how does this position, is there one PIO for the city, or how does that work?
They do have public information officers in police and fire. They're really specific to those sort of lines of business, and not necessarily an overall or a general PIO, which would be led by this person.
Okay, so the new PIO is, we had one at one point in time, and now we're replacing that with 50% tourism and 50%, I guess, general fund, or whatever the case is.
That's correct. And that's a department we're going to be talking later about during the study session in a little more detail.
Oh, and I'm sorry, I thought we had maybe moved on to the study session, but we're not there, I guess, at this point.
Yeah, it's interesting because we do have two almost identical looking agenda bill summaries, so we're still in the public hearing section of it.
Okay, well, my questions were related to the study session, so.
We almost could shut this conversation down and I could reopen the next agenda bill item unless somebody has more comments on that.
That's fine with me. I have other questions I'd like to ask in the study session. But
anybody have questions on this? No. So you have adequate direction.
Great.
Fair. So I'll open up the next agenda bill item, which is AB 14193. This is a study session regarding the city manager's proposed 2015-26 biennial budget. Robert Stowe, our city manager. Any presentation? We just
very briefly, much like what we did during our last study session, where you had most of the line departments present information, some brief information to you, and then a conversation ensued about their top budget highlights. We're going to do the same thing again this evening with most of the internal departments, or all the internal departments. But one of the line departments that wasn't able to present during the last study session was police. So we're going to start off with police. You'll hear a short presentation from the police chief, and then just answer any questions that the council might have, and then we'll proceed into the executive department, and we'll just simply follow the agenda bill until we get through all of the internal service departments. So with that as an introduction, I'd invite the police chief up to the podium.
Great, thank you.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and council members.
Greetings.
As you can see, I think the chart was handed out. There weren't a lot of changes in the police department budget. We did not increase any component of our M&O budget by the 2% that the city manager had authorized, except for the area of overtime. That overtime increase was necessary because we had not had an increase to that area since 2009, and it was just not sustainable. We needed to have add to that. In addition, that overtime increase does include the overtime that was added for the new officers that was part of the annexation, and that was reflected in the PAA budget. The reason we did not do increase to any part of our M&O budget outside of overtime is for three areas that we needed to cover. One was the liability insurance. That's a fund that covers about 5-year rolling average. Some years it is up, some years it's down, and it really depends on the type of cases that we've had over that period of time. We are currently in a time where it has increased, and so we needed to make sure that was covered. The second one was asset replacement. For the past 2 bienniums, we had not fully funded the asset replacement due to the issues that we found ourselves in with the recession. Now that we are exiting the recession, it was time to make sure that that replacement fund was fully funded, and this proposed budget corrects that prior issue, so it is a fully funded asset replacement fund now. The final one, and I think that we've had discussions before on this, is detention. And detention costs that are complicated and really outside of the city's control. There's 2 main drivers to this. One has to do with the rising cost of the Snohomish County Jail. There's a number of reasons for this. One is because the jail has not ever had full cost recovery in the past. That's been recognized, and they are making substantial efforts to be a full cost recovery model. The other part of that is the increasing problem with the medically challenged inmates and drug-addicted inmates, which is making for more of a risk in their inmate pool. This is requiring them to bring on additional personnel, and is also one of the reasons that they, instead of having a single-tiered cost for a daily maintenance rate, they're moving to a 3-tiered cost, which would be, you know, the average daily maintenance rate, the one that has to do with medical inmates that have medical issues, and then the mental health inmates. So that was a fairly significant increase for us. The other part of that has been the consequence of having other areas of county government not fully funded, particularly in the prosecutor's office, and having these serious cases that in prior years would have been heard at the county level being transferred down to the municipal level. And it's not just Bothell, it's across the board. But that has left us with both police, prosecutor's office, and the courts dealing with a level of individuals coming into the court system that are at a much more serious level of crime than we had seen in the past. So that obviously has an effect on the number of jail days that you would be having. So so what we ended up doing was taking a lot of the moving the money around to cover those 3 funds. We did have a positive on our budget, even though it's really a lateral movement. We were able to move into a different online policy and procedures manual system that has allowed us to update our manual. It's all now online, and keep us on track to accreditation, which I hope to have our department completed by next year, early next year. So with that, I'd like to open it up for any questions.
Great. Thank you, Chief. Councilmember Lamb.
Chief, thank you so much for your report. I wanted to touch back on the issue and the costs of the jail, and particularly the Snohomish County Jail. Mm-hmm. I know in years past we've taken a look at potentially housing inmates longer than the 12 hours that we keep them now in our jail. And I wanted to know if you have any thoughts on that, or if you think that's an issue that's worth revisiting in light of the fact that we'll be moving the city council out of these chambers, and this will be exclusively a court building going forward.
You know, we've been recognizing this increasing cost, and we actually looked at that very, very closely a couple years ago, to the point that we brought in somebody who was who runs the SCORE, the jail in the South End, to say what would it take to bring us up. I think we were looking at it for a 30-day facility, but it's pretty close. And there were some very significant costs to that. significant cost with personnel. You have to have a 24/7 coverage. So I think it was a little over 5 FTEs in addition to supervision, a supervisor. And then there were also facility modifications that would have to be made for both feeding, showers, a number of things, laundry service. We either had to make structural changes to our facility, or we could contract out with those things, but either side it was going to be a cost. There were also a question about the increase in insurance costs for obvious reasons, increase in liability. So what we did instead was look to sending more of our inmates to Sunnyside over in eastern Washington, which one bright piece in this is that their rates have gone down in our next
That's the Sunnyside.
In Sunnyside, correct. So we looked at that in a number of different ways, and we're still not at that break-even point. In addition, because of the medically challenged inmates that we're seeing, you have the medical piece that would either mean we'd still have to have these inmates taken to another facility, or we would have to provide medical coverage here, which is very, very expensive.
So I had another question, like kind of related to that, just to give people a sense of how many, like on an average night, how many people sentenced out of Bothell Jail are sitting in a jail.
You know,
that may be an unfair question to ask to you. But
funny that you should say that, because when I was sitting over there, I thought, I don't have an updated idea of what that number is, and that would be a question that I would have asked, and I will get that number to you. I don't want to give you an old number because it has fluctuated, so I will make sure I get that to you.
All right, thank you very much, Chief. Thanks for your report.
Other questions? Councilmember Sandberg?
I asked a bunch of questions, and I'm not sure. I haven't had a chance to check my email, so they're probably sitting in there. So I'm probably not going to be asking any questions tonight because I submitted a whole pile of them on last Wednesday. So just to save time.
Okay. Councilmember Evans.
Thank you for your report, Chief. 56% of our costs out of the general fund are public safety costs, and in the report it stated 10.6% that in the 2015-16 budget that the police costs will go up 10.6%. So I think you covered those. Those are detention costs that are going up, insurance, risk insurance that's creating some of that. And then we've added officers because of the annexation. Are those the main reasons that's increasing?
Well, the detention and the insurance, and then the asset replacement. As I said, that's why we didn't take anything else in our M&O other than the overtime. But those are the three big ones. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. And it was interesting. Each department provided annual cost per capita, and I think police is the highest cost per capita of any department in the city. Is, if I recall, $582.52 per person in the city is what we pay for police services, and I support that. It's high. I wish it wasn't that much, but I think we have to have it in this day and age. I think we're very fortunate to have the police department that we do, and I think part of the reason we have a great city is because of the work that the police department does. So it's a high cost, but I think it's money well spent, and I think it really adds to the quality of life in our community. So appreciate the job you and the department are doing, and I don't know how we can lower that cost. Apparently in the 2013-14 budget, it was about $600 per capita, so it did go down a little bit to $582 per capita. So,
well, again, we continue to look for cost-saving measures as far as, and that was why we are moving our inmates over to Eastern Washington after just a short period of time now. As soon as it reaches the point where they pay for the transportation costs, we ship them over.
Well, and I think that's something that this council is going to have to look at. I imagine all councils are looking at is the cost of public safety costs and how they're increasing and how we fund those in the future, because it's taking a big chunk, 52% of our general fund or so, 56% to fund public safety costs. So that's something that I'm sure we'll continue to discuss how we fund those. But I think we have an excellent department. I appreciate the job that's being done.
Another thing that I think this is not a conversation that is, again, tied just to Bothell. I think it's regional. And police chiefs have come together to say, how can we be more efficient with costs? I think in the last few years, you've seen more of a consolidation of services. So we now have a regional SWAT team instead of our own SWAT team. So it takes fewer members, and we pool our resources. You see that now we've had a long time with the regional response team to officer-involved shootings in Snohomish County, and we formed one in King County too. Again, so we can all work together for those rare but significant incidents. So.
Thank you, and again, 92% of your budget is personnel, so it's hard to cut that down much, but it sounds like you are looking for areas to compromise or to gain some efficiencies through combined operations and things, and that's great. Thank you.
Other questions? No? Great. Thank you, Chief.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thanks, Mayor. Now we have 4 remaining internal service departments, and Kathy Oster's going to present first on the executive department. We'll try to get through these 4 departments for you in the next 45 minutes.
Great.
And you can decide then how you'd like to proceed.
Take Kathy, and then we'll take a break right after?
Sure.
Okay. And just for council's consideration, this is a perfect night to ask questions, because what I see here is next Tuesday, December 9th, we're going to receive an ordinance with the hopes of approving our proposed budget for next Tuesday. So
Mayor and Council,
nice to
good
see you.
evening. So we have 4, the Executive Department, the City Clerk's Department, and Legislative and Non-Departmental. And we'll start with the Executive. As you're aware, the Executive Department is continuing to implement the Downtown Revitalization Plan, advance City Hall Center development, and implement cleanup of downtown, and recruit employers and retail for vacant space, as well as surplus city properties. The department itself has done well since 2005 through 2013 and our recommended budget for 2015 and 16 through a number of changes, especially through the recession, as all departments did. We did quite a few cutbacks. We're changing some personnel, as you can see from a paper that Finance Director handed out to you. We are converting a PIO position we converted it at one time to a professional services contract and are now putting that position in half-time with tourism. We had a change in 2013 and 14, the deputy city manager and assistant to the city manager positions combined into the assistant city manager position. The budget we are putting forward did a good job of staying within our recommended 2% increase. And if you'd like, we can stop and go through questions for the executive department, or I can continue through the other departments.
Does anybody have a specific question for the executive department at this point? Continue on.
Okay, city clerk. The city clerk department continues implementation of the citywide records and information management program, which helps support the focus areas by striving to provide citizens and staff easy electronic access to more city records. Some of the areas that the city clerk's budget is notably different in 2015-16 is the increase for codification. How we codify our ordinances into the Bothell Municipal Code has become more expensive. That service alone has increased quite a bit, as well as the services for managing records and record storage. So there's quite an increase there. There's something out of our control. There's not much we can do there. The cost of printing has gone up as well as advertising. Every time we have to advertise for a public hearing or we have to advertise information about an ordinance, that cost has gone up as well, and printing. The cost of microfilming and scanning records has also gone up. We contract that out. As an aside, the City Clerk's Department has been working with the Legal Department on public records requests. 70% of our one full-time office assistant, 70% of her time is dedicated to public records requests. We had over 400, or we'll have about 400 requests in 2014. That does not include, go ahead, Mayor.
Can I ask a question on that? So what percent of those 400 requests, how many are those 400 different individuals or organizations or what?
They're primarily individuals.
And is that 400 different people or?
Yeah. Some of them are repeat. Sometimes we have somebody, Laura, why don't you explain?
I can go up there if you want me to.
Sure, yeah.
Okay.
If you're comfortable with that.
We've had 412 public records requests thus far this year. Most of those are individuals, but a lot of them are repeat, but they ask for different things. So we have, somebody who puts in 6 or 7 requests or, as many as 10. We have noticing that
So I'm sorry to interrupt, but when you say that, when there's 412, that's 412 different requests. But, for example, in the one instance you cited, one individual was responsible for 10 of those 412.
Right, but they're different requests from that one individual.
Okay.
Yeah.
So do you have an idea of, of the 412, how many individuals are generating those 412?
No,
how many individual people?
I'd have to go back and look at our log. I don't have that with me.
I'd be interested to know that question.
Okay.
Or the answer to that question, rather.
Okay. I will say that the scope of what a lot of the requesters are asking for is significant increase in the scope of what they're asking for. So significant amount of time is spent gathering those records, and we cannot, get back the cost for staff time only for the number of pages or the cost of a disk. Yeah. So we can't charge for staff time in that.
Councilmember Sandberg has a question as well.
Do we have a policy that if someone makes a public record request and the staff provides that information and it's deemed non-confidential or non-proprietary, do we have a policy of posting that on the city website? So going forward, if someone wanted to find out, some particular piece of information, we would be able to say, oh, that's posted on the website. I mean, and if not, what would it take to have a policy that would achieve that? Because it seems like we could decrease public records requests if we made a lot more public records available.
We do not have a public records program, management program currently. However, anything that is, deemed a public record, ordinances, rezos, any kind of information that we have that is readily available, we do post on our website, and we will direct people to the website whenever possible and say, this is on the website, you can find it here, and give them the link. But it just depends on the request itself.
City Attorney, do you want to comment?
Well, I'll just add a small thing to that. A lot of the stuff that's very voluminous is it's of not much interest to most people, and we have limited digital storage space to post things to, and so we would quickly fill up the capacity that we have to post with things like with emails that are just nobody cares about other than one person trolling for something. And so it would not provide the public a lot of assistance. But things that we do see repeat requests for, then we do try to post those.
Answer your question. Good. Councilmember Evans.
So, I know in other cities, and this public records request has been an issue that's been looked at by cities a lot, and the legislature's looked at that making some changes and things. And in some situations, there's actually been, I think it's a great program. We need to be able to give that information to the public when it's requested. But there's actually been situations of, and I don't know what the right term is, harassment situations where they just continue to ask for information. Do we have, I'm hoping and assuming the majority of our requests are legitimate. Are there situations where there are just requests to be requesting to hassle the things?
And I'll respond to that. We do. We have harassing requesters. There's no doubt about that. And I think what the city clerk was referring to as far as the scope of requests is she's referring to this phenomenon that we're seeing, that people have latched on, a small minority of the public have latched on to this idea that they can basically get their pound of flesh out of government by using the public records request process. That's the perception. And so we do have requests for, one in particular that I'm thinking of right now. You have somebody who's not happy with the city in a business relationship, and so they request every email that the city has, and that is a multi-year project that our city clerk is working on right now, and it's purely for the. I can't say purely. I don't want to overstate. It is 99% for the purpose of harassment alone, in my opinion. So we are facing that. And we don't have the right to say, you know what, you're a harassing requester, we're not going to provide you the record. We have the obligation to provide the records that are requested for under the rules that have been laid down for us, and we seek very hard to meet those requirements and to follow those rules.
Councilmember Lamb.
So, Joe, following up on that, the requests themselves aren't confidential, though, right?
Not at all. We have provided, and we've actually had requests for requests, and we've provided those.
I guess I'd kind of like to know who is asking, in particular the business that you cited when we come forward, because I think it's important when we weigh. I'd like to see at the next meeting when we come back a list of who our requesters are. Because especially the instance that you talked about is exceptionally troubling, and I think, if the purpose of the business, and who knows, maybe they would articulate a legitimate purpose for asking for every single email in the city, but my sense is that the state law does not work in our favor in the sense that there's no discipline procedure for abusive requests, and I think it'd be interesting. I think the ability to publicly name a company that literally is just doing this to harass the city may be our only purpose in highlighting that, because I've talked to a lot of, and I have good friends who are, in the open government movement in the state of Washington, and I've talked about the examples of abuse, and I think most public records requests are entirely legitimate, but there's kind of a sense of skepticism. They're like, well, I'm not really sure that animal exists out there, and I'm like, no, it does exist, and they're like, well, you have to give me the name. So I'd like to know I'd like to see that at the next meeting.
Yeah. Well, we have been doing a better job of tracking these, especially in the last 2 years, and I believe that a list of the requesters is something that we could generate fairly easily.
Yeah, we keep a log of it, so we can generate that.
Great. Councilmember Sandberg, another question.
I'm fine with council asking for and receiving a list of the names of people who have made public records requests. However, I don't want the public to perceive that is somehow, some kind of, list that council needs to be made aware of, because I'm sure there are many people in our listening audience who, when they first heard you say there were harassing public records requests, thought, well, maybe they're thinking me because I asked for X document and now I'm considered harassing. But I was going to ask you, please define what you think is harassing, because then the people in the listening audience would go, okay, well, I wasn't that business entity upset with the city requesting all of the emails. So whatever the city attorney was describing as harassing doesn't apply to me. Okay, because I think that
we've spent a lot of time on this subject.
I know, but...
And if, Joe, if you want to answer, by all means, otherwise we need to move on.
I don't want people who are making public records requests to feel like, somehow the city is going to go on a witch hunt and publicize names.
We got the point. I heard him say that it's not a majority by any stretch of the imagination. It's a very minute section, but there are sometimes harassing. If you want to expand further, you're welcome to do so.
Well, actually, I appreciate the opportunity. We take this very seriously, providing public records, and we do our best to work with people, even people that are difficult to work with. And a harassing requester is not someone who irritates me or who has a different opinion than I am. A harassing requester is, in my view, is somebody who makes a request simply to punish the city for no real purpose, no real need of their own, or it's somebody who is overly broad in their request. They could narrow it down, but they look you in the eye and smirk and tell you, I'm not narrowing it down because I don't have to. You figure it out. And it make it on purpose difficult to deal with them. And so that's what I consider a harassing requester.
Great. Thank you, Joe. Kathy, should we finish the clerk section and then we'll take a break?
That pretty much wraps up. Clerks, do you want to go on and do legislative and non-departmental?
No, I think we're going to take a 15-minute break.
Okay.
Thanks so much. So council will be back at 8:25.